I want my HTV. I want it now, and I want it live. Yay! So, I wanted to read something to all of you, if you don't mind. In the description box, I dropped a link, and here's a link to my chat room. Is that it? Hang on, let me double check. Yes, that's it. So, I don't know. Hey, new era. How are you? Bougie on a budget. Hey, Celador, it's good to see you. I saw you this morning at Coach Dave's. I was just waking up too. But let's see. So, all right. This is what I wanted to share. Now, I've taken some heat about my testimony. Being an MK Ultra survivor and Pizzagate / Pedogate survivor. I've taken a lot of heat about the testimony I give regarding deep underground military bases, also known as DUMBs. And I get pretty sick and tired of it and fed up with it, to tell you the truth, because it's the same old thing over and over again. Now, I know the popular opinion would love to believe that Joseph Mengele died in 1979. I was born in 1974. So regardless of what we want to think or believe, Mengele was one of the Nazi scientists brought over here through Project Paperclip at the end of World War II. He was one among thousands of Nazi scientists brought over that escaped Germany, that were brought over into Canada, America, South America, Argentina, Africa, other places, so that they could continue on with their human experimentation. Now, if people want to believe that that Joseph Mengele is dead, the angel of death from World War II, you're right to your opinion. It still does not negate the fact, if you believe that, it still does not negate the fact that there are many masterminds and scientists that can to this day fill the shoes of Joseph Mengele and are very proud to do so. You know, programmers. I don't mention the names of my programmers. I have in the past, I don't anymore. Because it's not about them. It's not. It's about their victims and how to spare their victims and save their victims, give their victims back a quality of life, and get their victims cured and healed in Jesus' name, recovered, deprogrammed, give them back quality of life, give them back the life that was stolen from them. And that's what it's about when all is said and done. So I've read everything up to chapter 8 of this book, and then I stopped. Excuse me for a second. Oh. So what I wanted to do was to read one chapter for all of you. I know that I have not been the only one to suffer these things, and I know I'm not the only one going through these things. trying to cope with life after having experienced MK Ultra and Super Soldier projects. I remember someone, a few people, asking me how it was that people would not notice when I was gone, when I was an active super soldier. Like, how could it be that when I was a kid or a teenager or even in my 20s that I could disappear and nobody would notice that I was gone? Well, 95% of the people, when I tell them my answer, they say, okay, Holly, thank you. The other 5%, I think I just met that one person recently. And they can't understand it for the life of them. They really can't. So just as much as it is difficult for you guys to wrap your minds around things, just imagine how difficult it is for a survivor of these MK Ultra projects to be able to grasp what, when, where, why, and how it all happened to them. A lot of people are not going to understand the things I am about to read. A lot of people have not educated themselves, nor do they take the time to actually do so. My birthday last year, do you know what my present to myself was? My library card. Do you know what I do with my library card? I've been using it more than I've ever used my fishing license. And I love being outdoors. So I'll give you the answer. How did people not know that I was gone for, how did my grandparents not know that I was gone? Easy. They would come in and take me out of the house at night and bring me back in the morning before anybody would realize that I was gone. Or a clone of me was left in my place. And by the way, for anybody who wants to say that I was so sick in high school from asthma that I could not run, they would be inaccurate and a liar. I was on track and field in junior high and very athletic through high school, even through college, between rollerblading, ice skating, skiing, track and field. I've always swimming at the YMCA. I've always been athletically inclined. Martial arts, Aikido, Taekwondo, Hapkido, weapons training and tournament sparring. So even through me having asthma, I still did all of those things just like any other normal person without health ailments would do those things. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to read you, I think it's chapter 2. So I hope you don't mind if I read this big long chapter to you. Hey, Painful, how are you? Deaf Brad, what's going on? How are you, Tree? It's great to see you. Hey, Lou Girly. Okay, guys. Back to what I was going to read you. Oh, yeah, when I get a virtual background or when I get off my tuchus and hang something behind me, which I have something already to hang behind me, but I wanted one of those computer virtual backgrounds. Anyway, once I get one of those, I'll come back on camera, but not anytime soon. I don't want anybody to be able to see my backgrounds from here on out whenever I do a video going forward. So, Fritz Springmeier spent 8 years in prison because of this book. Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler both wrote this book. It's called The Illuminati Formula to Create an Undetectable Total Mind Control Slave. I had the pleasure of online reaching out to and meeting Mr. Fritz Springmeier, my brother in Jesus Christ of Nazareth, Yeshua HaMashiach. Very nice man. And when I reached out to him, I said, Fritz, Meek Fritz, my brother, I can't believe I'm about to say this to you, but I think I'm one of the kids that you wrote this book about. And then I profusely thanked him a gazillion times for what he did and went through to write this book, as well as Mr. Cisco Wheeler, but I have not had the pleasure to meet him in any capacity. But as far as Mr. Spritzmeier, I thanked him because this book really answered a lot of questions as to what happened to me. So, Chapter 2, the traumatization and torture of the victim. That reminds me of the last place I was at. Never mind, I'll shut up. Never mind. All right, in all seriousness, the basis for the success of the Monarch mind control programming. I'm going to digress 1 second here. As far as me, I'm not from Monarch. I'm from Project Beta. Similar, but different. It's similar, but it's different. Anyway, the basis for the success of the Monarch mind control programming is that difficult personalities or personality parts called alters can be created who do not know each other or who can take the body at different times. The amnesia walls that are built by traumas form a protective shield of secrecy that protects the abusers from being found out and prevents the front personalities who hold the body much of the time to know how their system of alters is being used. The shield of secrecy allows cult members to live and work around other people and remain totally undetected. The front alters can be wonderful Christians, and the deeper alters can be the worst type of satanic monster imaginable, a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde effect. A great deal is at stake in maintaining the secrecy of the intelligence agency or the occult group which is controlling the slave. The success rate of this type of programming is high, but when it fails, the failures are discarded through death. Each trauma and torture serves a purpose. A great deal of experimentation and research went into finding out what can and can't be done. Charts were made showing how much torture a given body weight at a given age can handle without death. Now, this is why the Nazis did all those strange concentration camp experiments, where they tested how quickly people would freeze or die from various traumas. It was for mind control. The abusers are very specific and scientific in their torture. A lab technician with a clipboard walks around monitoring the E for the children when they receive their initial traumas. Heart monitors are closely watched. Still, many children died from the programming. The programmers learned that when a child rolled up in a fetal position, it had given up the will to live. They learned to time how fast this would occur to give an idea how far to push the child. Parents in Eastern United States were taken to Harvard University for training to teach them how much trauma they could give their children at home before they would die. After the child got back from their initial programming, they were to receive daily traumas to keep them disassociative. I'm going to stop screen sharing, guys. Please forgive me. It's just that I have notifications, and if one of them pops up on my screen, I would be embarrassed because I hold people's confidences, and just forgive me. So I've dropped a link in the description box as well as into my chat room. I am reading from chapter 2. The primary or initial torture for many children in Western U.S. was done at China Lake, which officially has gone under the designations Naval Ordnance Test Station, pronounced in short as NOTS. Naval Weapons Center, NWC Ridgecrest, the town nearby, and Inyokorn, the area. The address is Nimitz Hospital is the code 232 Naval Air Weapons Station. The base was set up to test new weapons. Evidently, the Navy decided that mind-controlled people were an important weapon to test. Most of the new weapons created at China Lake were, for the most part, human robots turned out in large numbers. The Monarch mind control was carried out in large airplane hangars on the base, which have been able to house thousands of tiny cages, just large enough for human babies. Lots of 1,000 babies was a small batch. According to people who worked in the hangars helping program, many batches were 2,000 or 3,000 babies. Many survivors remember the thousands of cages housing little children from ceiling to floor. The cages were hot wired, electrified on the ceiling, bottom, and side so that the children who were locked inside can receive horrific electric shocks to their bodies to groom their minds to split into multiple personalities. These cages are called woodpecker grids. The victim sees a flash of light when DC voltage is applied. Later, this flash of light is used with hypnotic induction to make the person think they are going into another dimension when they are blasted with high voltage. In the Peter Pan programming, the programmers tell the slaves that this is riding the lightning. One of the popular traumas after the small child has endured the woodpecker grid cages is for days. One of the most popular traumas after the small child has endured the woodpecker grid cages for days is to rape it. The rape is intentionally brutal so that it will be as traumatic as possible. Many of the technical people on the base are civilians. This is in part because of the research involves mind control, and Illuminati civilian mind control experts have come and gone from the base. The California Institute of Technology at Pasadena is intimately connected to China Lake's research, by the way, to Illuminati. Also, much of the work at the facility is for the intelligence agencies and not the military. Intelligence assets are often civilians. One of the things developed in the California universities and then implemented at China Lake was color programming, which will be covered later in this book. Red and green were discovered to be the most visible colors for programming. Various color flashing lights were used in programming at NOTS. Survivors of the programming all remember flashing lights. The use of flashing lights has been introduced into American culture by the CIA. If a person goes into bars, clubs, and places where bands play, you will notice multicolored lights flashing. The flashing lights create disassociation, especially in people who are programmed. A list of major programming centers is given in the appendix. along with each site's programming specialties. Give me a minute, please. Excuse me 1 second. Excuse me. In this chapter, an example of just one of the bases used for early programming is given: the large and very secret China Lake facility in California near Death Valley. The children are brought into China Lake NWC, aka Knots, based by trains, planes, and cars. A number of the small airfields which fly these children into China Lake have been identified. One, which is no longer in use for moving children, was a private airstrip at Sheridan, or which was beside a large lumber mill. The lumber mill had an agreement to secretly house the children who had their mouths taped. Neighbors in the area were bought off and warned if they talked, they would be in trouble for breaching national security. The area has lots of mills joined by train tracks, which were used to shuttle the children around. Tied into this network was a Catholic monastery which lies between Sheridan and McMinnville, close to the rail network. The Union train station in Portland, Oregon has underground tunnels where children were temporarily warehoused in cages before continuing on their journey. The Jesuits were active in this part of the child procurement. Catholic adoption agencies, which are many, nuns who get pregnant, third world parents, and parents who sell their children were all sources of children for programming. When one thinks about how many corrupt people there are and how many towns and cities are on the West Coast and how many children are produced by satanic breeders, illegal aliens, and other parents who'd rather have the money than children, and the reader begins to realize how procuring batches of 1,000 or 2,000 children was no problem for the Illuminati working through intelligence agencies such as the CIA, NIS, DIA, FBI, and FEMA. The Finders, a joint CIA FBI group, procured children for the network for years. Some of the children needed for programming are to be used for sacrifices to traumatize those being programmed. The names of some of the people who work at procuring children for programming or sacrifice have been released in Fritz Springmeier's monthly newsletter. You guys, I'm gonna digress right now. If you guys, I would like to raise Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler up to Heavenly Abba for what they both have done in writing this book, for all of us. Thank you for the sacrifices they made to give us this book. Because I think one of the many, many, many reasons why Heavenly Abba, Yud-Hey Vav-Hey, are one true living God and Creator from the Holy Bible, I really think the one reason why Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler wrote this book was to give children like you and I vindication. It was to give SRA, DID, MPD, Super Soldier, Monarch, and all sorts of survivors. I think it was to give them hope because somebody is listening and somebody knows what happened to us. And God, thank you for that. Thank you. Because in my low moments, I remember that Fritz Springmeier gave up 8 years of his life in prison for this book, and now here it sits in front of me as a way for me to heal and recover. And I, for one, am truly grateful. So back to the book, I'll keep reading. The secret FEMA airstrip at Santa Rosa has planes landing and leaving all night. You know what I should have said, guys? I should have told you that this would be a trigger warning. I'll have to put that up and adjust my video name when I get done with this. I'm sorry. The secret FEMA airstrip in Santa Rosa has planes landing and leaving all night. Some of these flights go east and then land at the secret 1,800 square mile China Lake Naval Research Base and are believed to carry children for programming. The airstrip is called Santa Rosa Air Center. When I tried to get FAA information on this airstrip, they played stupid as if it doesn't exist. Yet, it is in operation. Near Santa Rosa is the Bohemian Grove. Southwest of Santa Rosa is the Air Center, which is not used by the public. This airport was recently used by private pilots as a FBO. It was during World War II as a training base for P-32 pilots and deactivated in 1952. After the war, it was leased to private companies such as the CIA. The paved areas are 4 feet of concrete and can land the heaviest planes in use. Is that right? The paved areas are 4 feet of concrete and can land the heaviest planes in use. There are no buildings over 2 stories in the entire area and no control tower. The FBI have a contingent in the federal building downtown Santa Rosa, and FEMA has a radio station at the airport. The Army Reserve also has some buildings in the area. However, there are some highly secret activity going on underground at the airport. 6 to 7 small planes sneak out of the closed base a day. And for a base of its description that is closed, that's very interesting. The planes take off in the evening and do not turn their lights on until hundreds of feet into the air. The Press Democrat of Santa Rosa ran an article on Thursday, April 22nd, 1993, about the federal government selling 70 acres of property just to the east of the airport. However, when one reads closely, the land is going to be offered to a host of federal agencies. The property was being used by FEMA. Parentheses 707-542-5434, end parentheses. If one thinks about it, it is unlikely that the radio station is a FEMA transmitter station. The close vicinity of the secret activity to the elite's Bohemian Grove makes this an interesting site for study. The airport used for the Bohemian Grove visitors is north of Santa Rosa on Highway 101, the Sonoma County Airport. United Express and American Eagle, which flies to and from San Jose, fly into this airport, which has a control tower. In 1964, the airport was reported to have also carried about 600 military operations, either a takeoff or landing per year. It was around this time that the federal government made an agreement with Sonoma County Airport to help pay for the runway to be extended, the runway to be strengthened, and the airport to be upgraded in numerous ways. The elite from around the world fly into here to go to Bohemian Grove, which is in the Monterey area. Monarch slaves are regularly abused at the Grove for the entertainment of Bohemian Grove members in kinky sex theme rooms, such as a dark room and the necrophilia room. Secret NWO order business is conducted in the small dark lounge with a wooden sign naming it U.N. Der Ground. UN Der Ground. Slaves are hunted in the woods for sport, and occult rituals, including infant sacrifice, are held outdoors in the grove. These airfields are described in detail so that the reader can begin to catch on to the network of small planes and airfields the Monarch system uses to transport children. The children are trickled from various collection points to China Lake. Monarch slaves, many of them children themselves, are used in this extensive child procurement system. Children are also used to entice and kidnap other children. Teenage slaves are used to escort and transport little children on trains, buses, and airplanes. The triangular-shaped airfield at China Lake has traditionally begun very early in the morning with lots of activity. The night flights from FEMA's Santa Rosa airfield being an extreme of incoming flights. The airfield connects to the main base area via Sandquist Road. Children are landed at this field while others are driven through the gates guarded by Marines, and others come through via the east-west rail line. The fact that children are driving through the gates is not alarming because inside the military perimeter is a high school, a junior high school, and 3 other schools. Some of the adults of the children being programmed stay in military barracks, Kwanse huts, and 1-story buildings while they wait. A male Monarch victim remembers a large hangar being at China Lake with a concrete floor and row after row of cages suspended from the ceiling, filling the large building. One of the programmers was dressed similar to a Catholic priest. The electric current that ran to the cages made a hum like an electric fence. There was a marble slab that served as an altar where black-hooded row people would take a bone-handled knife and sacrifice little children in front of the other little children in cages. Memories from other survivors about the place will be mentioned later in the book. Excuse me. Okay. More about the secret China Lake base. Charles Manson, a program Monarch slave who received initial programming at China Lake, lived with his cult only 45 minutes northwest of China Lake at the remote Myers and Barker ranches, Scotty's Castle in Death Valley, Bakersfield, Edwards Air Force Base, and Papa Ludo's Store and Tavern, with its secret underground programming center, are all in the vicinity of China Lake and have augment programming sites too. Old Route 66 went by China Lake, which is now just off US 395. The The area's tavern has been named the Hideaway. The building was low, away from the highway, with a large unlit parking lot. Only people who knew how to enter it by the obscure entrance on the side could get in. The Hideaway Tavern has been a local hangout for the CIA men in China Lake. It has served them excellent steaks. The base headquarters is known as the White House, and it looks somewhat like a yacht clubhouse northwest of the airfield at 39-64 and 4-33 east on the quad maps. The government has built a large magical seal of Solomon, a hexagram, with each leg a quarter-mile long on the ground. What was it like for a victim in the early 1950s in a Knott's area programming center? One of the buildings in the area used for programming was described as having a flat roof and a tan exterior, a fence around the building. Inside the front door was an old oak reception-type desk. A series of 3 doors connected by tunnels were gone through. One entered into a hallway and then took a left into the programming room. Tunnels connected the different hallways. The programming room was painted a good dissociative color white. In the middle of the room, cages were suspended with chimps. Chimps? I'm sorry. Forgive me. The examining table was metal, which was cold for the victim, but easy to wash for the attendants. The victim was placed in cages and could observe white dots light up in different dot patterns over the door on a panel of lights. The low-level shocks to the victim were coordinated with the dot patterns. Some of this relates to domino programming. An attendant monitored the entire scenario on charts while the child was repeatedly traumatized with low-voltage shocks. Needles were poked in the child. The room was made dark and then lit. Voices said, "Love me not." This was part of the love me, don't love me part of programming. Girls, I'm not saying that. I'm sorry, guys. You're going to have to read the book for yourself. I'm not saying those trigger words. Anyway, this was to build the ability to condition trancing by the victim upon electric shock. German and British scientists, mind control programmers came to Knott's after World War II, including Joseph Mengele, known as Dr. Green or Greenbaum, or other pseudonyms. The Illuminati's Dr. Black worked out of China Lake, also Dr. White, Dr. Ewan Cameron worked on programmers. If something went wrong, they might fly a child from a programming location to a specialist to get its special help for its programming. The men and women of the Illuminati helped the top programmers out. The grandmothers and the grandmasters of the Illuminati participated in helping with the programming. As a child of the Illuminati progressed through its programming, 3 people had oversight over its programming: its grandmother, its granddame, and the programmer. The Illuminati functions off a chain of command similar to the military. In fact, a big secret is that Satan's realm actually served as the model for military and political structures. As a child begins its programming, it is monitored in a fashion similar to hospitals where charts are filled and then these charts are filed. Tests and evaluations are done regularly. Goals are set with which are 6-month programming goals. They will say, in effect, we need to accomplish this by doing ABCD in the next 6 months. This is somewhat similar to an IEP, individual education plan, with the special ed teachers in Oregon set up for each student. At some point, the strong points and the weaknesses of the child will be identified, and then a decision will be made as to what occupation the Illuminati want to program the person to become. If the young boy is aggressive and has sadistic tendencies, the Illuminati will call it a warmonger and label its chart This child will be a general. If the young boy is aggressive and has sadistic tendencies, the Illuminati call it a warmonger and label its chart. This child will be a general. Then they proceed to program it to become a general. Nurses, teachers, and child's physicians must be programmed with a gentleness to their system. Their occupations, such as lawyers, can be allowed to be ruthless. Many of the children have religious fronts labeled for their programming, and a very popular occupation for Illuminati men is to become clergymen. Religious leaders make up the majority of fathers of Monarch survivors that have sought help. Most Illuminati victims have parents who are important religious leaders, many of them top clergymen in the established churches. As the reader might expect, some tortures require that the child victim's temperature, respiration, pulse, and blood pressure be closely monitored. What trauma does. In recent times, the military and the science of psychology is paying attention to what they call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD are the psychopathetic, debilitating effects of trauma and chronic nature to reactions to trauma. Intrusive flashbacks of the trauma will occur if the mind doesn't protect itself from the reminders of the trauma. The mind creates avoidance patterns to protect itself from thinking about the trauma. Panic symptoms occur when the person undergoes psychological arousal to traumatic cues. A trauma will create a certain shatteredness within the victim. The victim will develop life assumptions about being vulnerable, about having little personal worth, and that life is not fair. They may develop phobias and constantly check their environment for safety and constantly monitor others to make sure they are not mistreated. For centuries, warfare has taken place, and the military men have experienced PTSD. However, a full description and investigation into the disorder has been done only in recent history. The U.S. military has prevented any serious counseling for their troops suffering from this. Peer counselors and rap groups were allowed and misled by the Army to believe that they would be adequate. PTSD will often lead to outbursts of rage, chronic depression, or borderline dysfunctions. The PTSD in Monarch victims is masked by the MPD, DID, and the programming. Then in turn, the programming masks the MPD. When the programming is complete, front altars have been created which can function with smiles and cheerful attributes, while underneath the mind is full of shattered, hurting altars, who the slave is unaware of. Self-punishment and social withdrawals are natural symptoms of PTSD, and the programmers have no trouble enhancing and programming these functions into their altar systems. Certain altars end up holding the anger, the fear, the social withdrawal, the guilt, and the desire for self-punishment. These are held in check by the programming and take the body when the slave steps outside of the programmed path. The bad memories in the minds of men who suffer from PTSD have been noted to recycle and self-perpetuate themselves as they lie unresolved in the memory cells. Bad memories for the victims of Monarch programming are used to hold the MPD, multiple personality disorder, the programming in place, and also to keep the victim in compliance. In 1954, Maslow, Maslow, published his hierarchy of needs, which when applied to monarchs and PTSD victims means that they cannot progress in therapy until their survival and safety needs are met. Wow. Interesting. That's really interesting. That explains a lot. However, the programmers/abusers know that it is important to keep the slave away from safety. To this end, the programmers employ people internally to monitor slaves and internal alters in the victim's mind to be monitoring alters and reporting alters. Reporting alters can always reach the network of abusers via 1-800 telephone numbers, which change every 2 weeks. They can also call their handler. Reporting alters are very unemotional and serve as tape recorders which mechanically report any developments that might threaten the programming to their handler. Alters programmed to commit suicide are also built into the systems. For instance, a system hacker, an outsider, to work with the alters of an internal Grand Druid Council, aka Executive Committee alters or Judge alters, or system almost ensures 99% of the time suicide of the Monarch slave. In at least 99% of the cases where monarchs who have come in for therapy, they still lack safety, which is a higher need than trying to go against their programming. This is why so few people have really gotten free. To undo the programming, the victim needs safety. The programmers know this and have set up almost fail-safe methods where the victim is not even safe from their own system of alters, let alone Big Brother. Therapists call their monarch victims survivors. A misnomer, because in reality they are still in the middle of ongoing abuse. Some therapists may mistakenly think that it is helpful to tell the victim, "These fears you are having are from the past." Deliverance ministries may also try to stop the victim's fears without understanding the reasons behind the ongoing fear. Other chapters in this book will deal with the extensive backup methodologies. At this point, I'm going to digress for 1 second. I think I said this before. I want to point it out again. Fritz Springmeier is our brother in Jesus Christ of Nazareth. He's a Jesus lover like you and I. Okay? At this point, it is mentioned in the content of this chapter to establish to the reader that the abuse and torture continue non-stop. Some of this would naturally occur anyway, but the programmers enhance this naturally occurring phenomena may fall to ensue that the slave will continually abuse themselves. This means as time progresses, some monarch systems are timed to shatter certain levels and to create new levels. If the programmers want, they can shatter a front Christian altar level and create a new level of New Age believing altars to replace the original front. The abuse can be done by the victim themselves to themselves because programming altars are also given the ability to pull up horrific memories via codes. Those traumatic memories which shatter the mind the first time are still capable of doing it again when they are abstracted. That is, relived by the body and mind. More and more people are experiencing working with someone with multiple personalities. However, very few multiples ever discover more than the front parts of their systems. Very few people outside the programmers have much idea of what an entire personalities. The brain is very complex. Recent brain research confirms that the brain was far more complex than imagined. In an average brain, there are more than 10 billion individual nerve cells. Each of these has 10 with 100 zeros following it worth of interconnections. In other words, an average brain has vastly more interconnections than the total number of atoms in the universe. Often about 500,000 different chemical reactions take place every minute in the average brain, and the number can be several times during intense activity. A monarch's brain has been worked on to be even more active than a normal person's brain. The left and the right side of the monarch's brain both work simultaneously, and the various personalities are all busy working simultaneously on different tracks. To describe the complexity of what is happening with someone's mind, which has been messed with so dramatically for years, means that at times an approximate model is present that at times only an approximate model is presentable. There are several terms which are used in speaking about multiples, which have developed several meanings. Unless these terms are correctly defined, misconceptions about them can cloud an understanding of what happens during Monarch programming. First, researchers have discovered that deep within a person, the brain truly understands in a pure awareness all about itself. This is true for everyone. This pure awareness has been named various names, including hidden observer. If a man is obnoxious and seems to have a total lack of awareness that he irritates people, just know that deep down an awareness realizes exactly what he is and what he does. The multiple's brain at some deep awareness knows what has happened to it. The term hidden observer is fraught with danger, though. The demonic entity called the hidden observer works hand in glove with the programmer to program the individual. The hidden observer is able to see everything the system does. The people who control, as slave frequently call up the hidden observer to ask questions. In this case, it is a demonic entity, yet it is the hidden observer, which each system has, that some therapists are trying to access to understand the system. This hidden observer only tells the truth to its master because it is demonic. The next term, which is misunderstood, is the term the core. Programmers set up various altars to pretend to be the core and the core's protector. The real core is quite hidden and not placed within the regular grid of the altar system's chart. It will take some time explaining to convey what happens to the mind and what the real core is. One thing discovered by research into the genetic transmission of learned knowledge by humans to their children was that people are born with certain fears. Snakes, blood, seeing internal body parts, and spiders are all things that people are born fearing. The phobias towards these things are passed down genetically from one generation to another. In searching for traumas to apply to little children, the programmers found that these natural phobias, which occur in most people from birth, will work wonderful to split the mind. Along this line, the following samples of traumas done to program the slave. A, being locked in a small confined spot, a pit, or a cage with spiders and snakes. B, being forced to kill and cut up and eat innocent victims. C, immersion into feces, urine, and containers of blood. Then being made to eat these things. These are standard traumas. Often a victim will experience not only all of the above, but many others before they reach 4 or 5 years old. It is important to traumatize the child early before it has a chance to develop its ego state. By the way, when the child is placed into a small box with spiders or snakes, they will often be told that if they play dead, the snake will not bite them. This carries out two things for the programmers. It lays the basis for suicide programs, i.e., if you are dead, then you are safe thinking. And it teaches the child to disassociate. Traumas to split the mind are not just high voltage or natural phobias, but encompass the full range of the emotional and spiritual being of the victim. The victim is eventually stripped of every spiritual or emotional research by a variety of traumas, such as blood orgies where male and female genitals are cut, torture sessions on all types of medieval torture machines, staged events where actors imitating God, Jesus Christ, police, and therapists curse the victim, reject the victim, and even kill the victim in simulated drug deaths. Children are placed in hospitals in captive, abusive conditions. Children are tied to innocent children, which are systematically and brutally killed, while the children are made to believe that they are guilty for the child's punishment. Near-death experiences such as drowning have become an art with these abusers. Training dogs, monkeys, and other animals are used to further traumatize the victims. An Illuminati slave will most likely have experienced all of the last few paragraphs above, plus much more. Toby was one of the trained Knots chimpanzees. He was trained to be sadistic. The other trained chimpanzees at China Lake included Gabby or Gabrielle, who tickled the victim while they were tied up. Rastus, who had a toy chest with diamonds, bracelets, and a scepter, which electroshocked. Zorro, who could do anything mean. Elmore, who cuddled as a mother but ate raw flesh, plus others. An example of something said during program with the chimps is three little monkeys in a cage, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Joseph Mengele, aka Dr. Green, was skilled at using German Shepherds to attack people. Mengele got a reputation in the Nazi concentration camps for using German Shepherds before he was brought over to America. I gotta digress 1 second here. I cannot stand German Shepherds. I'll tell you that right now. And I don't think I was born with that natural phobia. They're the most sneakiest dogs I've ever come into contact with in my entire life. You got to keep an eye on those things. Anyway, Mengele got a reputation in the Nazi concentration camps for using German Shepherds before he was brought over to America. He used dogs to help program American children. The Process Church often uses German Shepherds too. Process Church. He was also skilled in abortions and was involved in weird traumas involved with babies being born or the simulation births of dead rats or other gross things from the vaginas of girls being programmed. When the satanic cults tie their victims with wire for rituals, some of these people will lose their toes or fingers from the wire. Ooh, I remember that. We used to keep our toes and fingers spread so they wouldn't melt together. Anyway, getting back to the book, I'm sorry for my outburst. I'm sorry for my outbursts, but getting back to the book. At times, little fingers and the top part of ring fingers were lost in satanic cult rituals too. Many of the traumas and tortures were carried out by alters or persons who are sadistic. How does the network get sadistic men to torture little children? 3 different respectable studies. Harrower in 1976, Milgram 1974, Gibson, 1990, show that essentially all human males can be taught to engage in sadistic behavior. There may be a few exceptions, but the point is that sadistic people are not in short supply for programming. Some of the altar systems have extremely brutal sadistic altars. In fact, the Mothers of Darkness altars are an important balancing point to prevent the sadistic male programmers from killing more of the children than they are working on. These sadists get a laugh at hurting little children. The more pain, the more charge and excitement they get out of it. Sadists enjoy gaining control over a person. In order to do this, they take charge over the little child's basic body functions such as sleep, eating, and pooping. They enjoy terrorizing the little child, so Monarch slaves end up watching hours of sadistic behavior done to others before they are even 5 years old. The worse the trauma, the more sadistic programmers enjoy it. Sensory deprivation, forced labor, poisoning, and rape of every orifice of the child are popular tortures by the programmers. The child soon learns that he is at the mercy of crazy people who can only be satisfied by total submission and the willingness to allow someone else to think for you. The child will be made to eat feces, blood, and other disgusting things while the programmer eats good meals. Some of this sadistic behavior is toward a goal. Cutting a person's tongue and putting salt on it reinforces the no-talk programming. Making someone throw up to cause eating disorder programming. Dislocating shoulders to cause disassociation. When the child victim's crying is heard, they immediately apply torture so the child thinks it will suffocate. This is behavior modification and is covered later in Chapter 9. This trains the child not to cry. Around age 3, a black mass, a sick evil communion is performed, which is so ugly that the child hides in disassociation by creating a locked up or obscure child. This early flip provides a base for dark side programming. This locked up child can have a powerful healing with system-wide effects by being part of a positive, love-filled communion. There are many traumas which can be carried out, which leave no physical scars, but do leave the child with the deepest emotional and spiritual scars. This is often necessary when programming young children who the outside world will see soon after their programming session. Holding one's arms out is a simple torture. Tickling and sensory deprivation are two tortures that leave no marks. Burial caskets, some outside and some at inside locations, are often used on slaves. This is why many slaves fear being buried alive. The programmers place all types of creepy insects in the caskets when they bury the person alive. Another type of sensory deprivation is done by placing the victim in salt water for buoyancy and weightlessness. Then the victim is fitted with sensory sensors that shock the person if the victim moves. The shock puts the person back into unconsciousness. The brain is trained to stop all external body movement from the conscious mind. This type of sensory deprivation is used to place a post-hypnotic, excuse me, okay, forgive me. I had to take a breath, and I just wanted to check my chat room real quick. I'll give shout outs in a minute. Please forgive me. This type of sensory deprivation is used to place in the post-hypnotic commands to do something at future date, far into the future. The program is placed into the mind at the same primal level that the mind uses to tell the heart to beat. One of the appropriate tortures is to place a bar between a little girl's legs, which spreads the girl's loins for rape. Then the bent, spread legs are flapped, while the victim is specifically told she is a monarch butterfly. Many victims have created butterflies in their minds while being raped. It doesn't take long for the child to realize it has no ability to resist what is being done to it. The will of the child victim is destroyed, and in its place remains a pliable slave. If the slave doesn't learn correctly, they receive more pain. A fish hook in the vagina is a popular one. Older males have their genitals hurt during additional or reprogramming sessions. They may have to eat the skin taken from their genitals. The mind of the victim is not only divided from itself, but the very process of torture makes the victim distrustful of humans in general. On top of this distrust, the programmers will layer in programming to isolate the person from healthy relationships, which in turn increases the victim's feeling of helplessness. They are divided from their own parts, their own self, and the world in general. For instance, the water, cave, and sand tortures make the survivor fearful of oceans. Alive in sand and abandoned. For a while, the Illuminati was big on water torture because they had built into their systems a weakness that water would destroy the clone armies that protected programming, and they needed their slave systems to be fearful of water. Slaves are frequently lowered into black holes or pits containing the most scariest things possible. This is a frequent trauma because the victim, when left in a dark hole for hours or days without any contact with the world or water and food, will develop deep emotional scars and disassociation rather than telling signs of physical abuse. This torture is used essentially on all monarch slaves. Some of the traumas are done for specific medical reasons. For instance, the person is starved only allowing, for instance, 300 calories a day for, say, small woman of 125 pounds. Sugar and proteins are severely limited, so the brain is starved into submission. Water deprivation, which is taught to parents who raise monarch slaves, is used from time to time on slaves to raise the brain's temperature, which happens when the brain swells from lack of water. When the brain gets woozy and overheated, it hallucinates and has a hard time remembering events. If water deprivation is combined with electric shock, it makes it harder yet for the victim to remember anything. Heavy exercise, along with long periods of little sleep, 2 to 3 hours per day, causes an overproduction of endorphins in the brain, and victims begin to robotically respond to commands. This was done to co-author Fitz under the pretense of military training. The other author, Cicsco, experienced it as part of her mind control. The brain under such stress may flip its functions from right to left and vice versa. Hypnosis is easier when a brain is tired. Most victims remember being suspended upside down. This was honed to a fine art by Mangley with concentration camp victims, while records were made of how fast blood drained from a child or adult stomach when they were dunked upside down into a tank of cold ice water. The cold water tests supplied the data on temperature levels of consciousness faded. This information then was used later on in America to help the survival rate of children given the same trauma. Simply hanging a person upside down for 1 or 2 hours will begin to play tricks on the mind. The mind will begin to disassociate and will begin to reverse the primordial brain functions such as pain and pleasure. The person's mind rearranges. This is often done with beta alters or beta models to get them to think that the pain of this sadistic rape is a pleasure. After this rehearsal in the mind that pain is love, the S&M kitten alters will beg their handler to slap them, tie them, hurt them, etc. They will tease their handler and tell him he is not a real man if he shows any mercy in how the pain is inflicted. Fire, burning, torture is used in the porcelain face programming. The charismatic branch of the satanic network, such as the Assembly of God churches, uses porcelain face programming. This is done by using wax masks upon the victim and giving them fire torture. The person actually thinks that their face has melted. At that point, the programmer pretends to be a god and a hero and tells the person he will give them a new face, a porcelain mask. These new faces, by the way, look like the ones sold in so many stores. The memories of abuse are then hypnotically hid behind the masks. To take off the mask is to abract and burn again. If anyone touches the faces of altars with porcelain face programming, the altars will feel a burning sensation because their masks are not to be tampered with. This means that these altars have, via torture and hypnosis, lost their own faces. This is part of the dehumanization process, which Chapter 10, Part C talks about. As long as these altars stay in denial of what has happened to them, they do not have to face the burn torture memories. Some altars are tortured in a fashion that the eye area is traumatized and they squint the left eye. They look like Baron Guy de Rothschild of France's left eye looks. Guy de Rothschild is a major handler or programmer, but the reason for his drooping eye is not known. Perhaps it was torture. The ritual aspect of trauma needs to be covered. By traumatizing someone on a specific day, say repeatedly traumatizing them on their birthday, and my birthday's coming up in a couple of months too. Perhaps it was torture. The ritual aspect of trauma needs to be covered. By traumatizing someone on a specific day, say repeatedly traumatizing them on their birthday, is far more damaging than simple traumatizing them. The reason is that every time that person's birthday date recycles, they are put back in their memories of abuse. Sexual abuse of a child is more powerful when it is put into the context of demonic magic. The abuser's semen is magic and seals the programming. The ritual aspect of it and the repetitive nature of the abuse creates several dynamics that accompany the abuse that wouldn't occur in non-ritual abuse. The lie that accompanies such abuse is that this institutionalized abuse is on obligation for both the abuser and the victim. For instance, the mind control of the Beast Barracks experience at West Point, USMA, is an uninstitutionalized abuse that allows the abuser to step aside responsibility for sadistic behavior and sets the stage for the abuse to be continued under the disguise of tradition. Finally, there is one more category of trauma, those to produce cosmetic looks. For instance, breast implants or electric shock to create moles at certain locations for either as a sign telling other handlers the extent of the programming, or for a Maryland look-alike. A stage trick is to use multi-needle device to scar the tissue. The scar, which was made in a pattern, a popular one is the satanic goat's head of Mendez, can be made visible by hypnotic command. This allows the handler to look powerful to ununiformed viewers. This is further discussed in Chapter 8. This stage trick has been done by the occult world for centuries. During battles, soldiers have been known to wall off horrible events with insomnia walls. Just like the soldier who walls off a traumatic battle scene where he sees his buddy disemboweled by a grenade. So the child walls off trauma. However, the soldier must only endure a relatively small amount of trauma compared to the children who are programmed under the Monarch trauma-based mind control. A soldier may remember his trauma by being triggered by something that reminds him of trauma. Likewise, the child victim will have things that trigger it too. One way of describing the split is to say the child's mind is saying, this isn't happening to me. It's happening to someone else. And a split in the personality occurs. The new split will have the characteristics of what it split from. The programmer will ask the alter being tortured to create something in the mind when the split is created, such as, I want 12 white fluffy kittens. The programmer, demons, and the child's creativity work together with the disassociation to create alters. Those 12 white fluffy kittens will have the characteristics and memories of what they were made from. However, they are separated from each other by disassociation, and they will be given their own script and own separate identity by the programmer. The disassociation between some alters who are co-conscious is not full-blown amnesia. After the programmer has instructed the child what alters he wants made when he tortures the child, the programmer will inject a truth serum to determine whether the correct alters were made and the correct amount. The child's creativity is being guided by torture. The programmer will often everything seems calm for the moment. Here's where I am. The child's creativity is being guided by torture. The programmer will often call, oh wait, is that where I was? Yes. The programmer will often also call up the hidden observer and ask what has happened internally in the mind of the victim. Another way of looking at what happens is to understand that the part of the brain that records personal memory, that is the personal history memory section, is divided up into little pieces by insomnia walls built to protect itself from the repeated traumas. Each section is walled off from another section by amnesia. Each trauma has an amnesia wall built around it. Each trauma memory is sectioned off. The walled off section is a piece of memory that will be identified and a hypnotic cue attached by the programmers that will put it up to the conscious level. And further, if the programmers so desire, it can be given a history, a name, a job, and developed into a full-blown personality. It's important to grasp that the entire mind is not sectioned off into parts. Some areas of the mind, such as the areas that holds skills and talents, is available to all the alters who want to access that talent. The talent doesn't belong to that alter, but to the system. Autobiographical memory is remembered differently than simple facts and skills involving primitive parts of the brain. A sense of time, a sense of self are attached to autobiographical memories. These things are stripped of an alter as its functions within the programming memory. Memory storage is also linked to the brain's state of mind at the time. Hormones released at the time of an experience will modulate the strength of the memory of that experience. The limbic hypothalamic system of the brain, which consists of the amygdala, hippocampus, cingulate, gyrus, fornix, septum, certain nuclei of the thalamus, and the Papez circuit. Oh, wow, I'm sorry, guys. Has a central modulating part which interacts with peripheral hormones. Peripheral epinephrine will be released if the amygdala is electrically stimulated. The adrenal medulla releases epinephrine that is vital for memory storage. In other words, there are hormones which help the brain remember or not. A particular talent is not used by every alter. A non-sexual alter, an alter with an asexuality identity, is not going to access talents involved in sexual foreplay. This is because memories are both occurrent states and also dispositions. And when a disposition is disassociated, the alter must maintain a different set of dispositions. A 3-year-old child alter is not going to access abilities to write. To do so for these alters would mean attacking the amnesia walls, which hold horrible memories. Right, just as I'm trying to write my autobiography, I find this out. I'm teasing, guys. Back to the book. I'm sorry. They would mean going against the programming and its penalties and their own understanding of reality, which is the program's storyline that the alter has been convinced of under penalty of losing its life. To disassociate a memory and to take on a particular role and identity involves constant reinterpretation of past events. It may also mean that the alter must contrive an interpretation of present events. The 3-year-old may, for instance, see breasts, but decide they belong to someone else in the system who they share the body with. This is in part dictated by the necessity of obscuring the pain of the trauma that separates the alter from the rest. Each day that the alter confronts reality, they will face the threat that old memories will not agree with the storyline created. For instance, the handler's sexual advances carried out in front of that asexual, non-sexual alter must be misconstrued so that the illusion of not having been raped is continued. This is why normal life has a way of breaking down the multitude of lies and programming of the deeper alters, which live in a fantasy world created during the programming. The deeper alters have never had the chance to experience life outside of their programming, since they hold the body only at infrequent, specialized moments, which are disjointing in time. The alters created to be fronts to normally hold the body will be given lots of programming to help them hold on to certain denials so that it will find it necessary to ignore or reinterpret dreaded associations linked with disassociated memories. For instance, a Christian alter is sincerely very righteous and holy. The thought that this person, technically the alter's system of persons, could have done the most horrible, savage, demonic activities is inconceivable. The memories of ritual are safely ignored because the reality would undermine everything the person is. This phenomena is not seen in memory disassociation, but also under hypnosis when a person accepts a suggestion which flies in the face of the reality they can see. If a person accepts a suggestion that there is no dog in the room, they will struggle internally to maintain that illusion. If asked to walk on a collision course with the dog, they will unconsciously move around it. And if asked why they stumbled around the dog, they will construct an artificial excuse, which is accepted even though it is transparently implausible. One of the Monarch programmers, Orne, O-R-N-E, called this trance logic. Trance logic are those poison strategies to maintain a dissociative or hypnotic hallucination. The frontal lobes of the cerebral cortex are called the Broman areas, number 9 through 12, are responsible for a person's own responses to circumstance, i.e., what some call personality. When the mind is split, this natural personality is not erased, but rather it is a collected pool upon which various responses from it are attached to various personalities. Damage to these Broman areas tends to give an overall effect of making the person passive. The programming is not designed to damage these areas, only to control what emotions they contain are linked in memory to the various memory fragments that will be made into personalities. The reticular formation is the location of the brain's mechanism which determines the state of consciousness all the way from alert to hypnotic trance to sleep to coma. It interacts with the frontal lobes and the rest of the brain. Each memory is a function of several parts of the brain working together. Memory is a function of alertness, state of consciousness, reticular formation, the emotions, Brodmann areas 9 through 12, and thalami, priorities given to memories. Thalami? Anyway, and several complicated processes where the brain categorizes and interfiles the info with the remembered data by building in amnesia walls between event, personal history memories, and by the producing altered states of consciousness. The memories of a slave can be nested, as the programmers call it. Nested means that it is hidden behind several locked doors when the mind files the memory. Sometimes the person must go back to the altered state to recover a memory. The electric shock also scrambles the brain's filings of a memory so that it is filed in bits and pieces. Because of the use of electroshock, if memories do start surfacing, they surface in pieces. Sometimes a complete memory will be held by thousands of parts who the mind must bring together to recover the full memory. It has been discovered that memory retrieval is best when the environment is identical to when the memory took place. If we memorize numbers underwater, we will recall them better underwater. Another thing discovered about trauma memories is that they are stored in the sensory motor processes rather than the just normal memory sites of the brain. These memories are called body memories, and they do not lie. The false memory syndrome is way off base on their attacks. But then all of us who know the real story realize that they are just a cover-up damage control scheme of the CIA. Let's return to describing the core. Excuse me, guys. I gotta stretch a second. Let's return to describing the core, or that part of the brain which is intact at the beginning. If we pause to consider that a non-multiple person will experience struggles in their mind when simultaneous, overlapping, but conflicting desires meet in conflict, i.e., should I lay in bed, go to work, or go fishing today? Oh, that's an easy question. All right, never mind. Let me get back to the book. For instance, should I lay in bed, go to work, or go fishing today? A particular part of the brain, a synthesizing self, is capable of ordering such a conflict. It transcends all these conflicting ego states. A single synthesizing self in the brain is likewise responsible for the desynthesizing of the ego states. The victim, in order to appease the programmer, sets up different and opposite alters relative to a single system's needs. The formation of alters is systematically and intelligently guided by the programmers, especially in the early ages. The alters are created to meet the needs of the system that the programmers impose upon it, and not to adapt to an abusive parent. Some therapists have failed to see that alter formation is not natural, but maladaptive practice that is guided by the victim's desire to please and its fear of the programmers. The pool of abilities will be shared in different combinations among the various alters. An alter may have a unique ability that consists of subsidiary traits which may not be unique but are shared by other alters. As a child develops, if certain areas of the brain are stimulated, then is believed by researchers to be the actual place the memory is held. The growth in connections in their meaningful ways creates meaningful patterns that make up memory. When memory storage occurs, changes in terminals of axons ending in dendrites occur. Dendrite spine, which look like trees, develop. One tree, dendrite spine, might look like an oak in winter. Another might look like a mass of seaweed. For various reasons, as the brain of a multiple grows, it physically grows different than a normal person's brain. The brain can get around what has been done to it in some ways, but it needs to be borne in mind that we are not dealing with just bad memories, but brains which have had their physical makeup and brains which have had their physical makeup and functioning altered. It is interesting to see how many different alters has a different EEG profile. One of the primary brain areas affected by the torture and programming are the areas which store event, personal history, memory. These areas are the hippocampus, or the cortex of the frontal brain lobes, which work with the two thalamus. General knowledge is stored in the neocortex, the gray area of the brain, or the outer thin layer. The brain has particularly no limit to memory. However, it will select what it wants to remember, and it will decide how it will file what it remembers. Hypnotic suggestions to forget something often simply means the person remembers the event but labels the file forgotten. Slaves are always under hypnotic suggestions to forget what they have experienced. However, usually the brain is in actuality only appears to comply and then secretly records the event. Hypnosis will be dealt with in Chapter 4. All the programming of each and every slave is anchored upon some type of trauma. One of the first fundamental traumas will be watched, filmed, coded, and used as an anchor. For instance, the most brutal rape of a girl by her father will be used as an anchor upon which to build the beta programming. In Chapter 1, it was discussed how the primary severing of the core was incest. Extreme psychosis is created within a child trying to deal with the issues created by the incest from the child's most important figure, their father figure. In Moriah's slaves, this is the standard method to sever the cord, create an anchoring trauma. When Mayer Emschel Rothschild, original name Bauer, was on his deathbed, he demanded from his sons that they protect the power of the house of Rothschild through incest. Electric shock can cause pain, but this is nothing compared to the confusion in the mind caused by incest issues. Entire words of loyal alters, whose only function is loyalty to the biological ancestral father, are created in the slave. This world of loyal alters may be the daisy world, The hardest bonding to break within Illuminati slaves is the bond to their ancestral father. Non-Illuminati mind-controlled slaves are bonded to other people, the cult leader or programmer. Whatever fundamental trauma is decided upon, all the rest of the programming will be built upon that anchor in the victim's mind. See chapters 7 to 9 for further information on how the programming is layered in. This fundamental trauma is not the bottom beast computer, which sits at the bottom of the subconscious mind. Internal computers are complex. This is simply an anchoring memory that the programmers begin with. In large systems, the programmers will choose an experience that all of the alters are familiar with. When large programmed alter systems come in for a major rehaul, oh geez, excuse me. Wow. When large programmed alter systems come in for a major rehaul, the programmers will call up section by section with the correct code words until they are all at the front of the mind. When this is done, thousands of alters are pulled up, co-conscious, and worked on all together. When this occurs, it is an exceptionally big surprise for most alters, who have lived their entire existence in disassociated isolation from other alters in their system. Why would the programmers do this? For several reasons: speed and that desire to have common anchoring experiences and common programming imagery. Blood and perfume have been linked together in magic for thousands of years. The magical writing are full of the different concoctions created for ritual smells. Some of these over the centuries were smells which were discovered cause people to go into a trance or disassociate. A common wretched smell at satanic/Illuminati rituals is the smell of human flesh, as human flesh is heated to make candles in wooden ritual cups. It is reported that the stench of human flesh burning can cause disassociation. The power of sense was noticed in ancient China by Li Po. P-O. The alchemists studied sense very carefully. The case at London, FR, written about in chapter 10, pages 295 through 296, had nuns going into different associative states at the smell of different flowers. Cinnamon is a widespread scent used in programming deeper parts in the system. The smells of feces and urine is a trauma to a small caged child. Interestingly, urine contains an alpha, which is the scent element which triggers the human mind sexually. Mariah knows how to use the various scents, incense, etc. Astral magic uses various perfumes. Astral magic uses various perfumes. According to someone who has helped with the programming and moon child ceremonies, occasionally the child, while in the womb, when traumatized by the moon child rituals, retreats into its mind like a cocoon and develops autism. Autism is an emotional problem where the child withdraws from reality and goes into its own private world of altered states. The programmers for many years did not know why children developed autism from the trauma rather than MPD, DID, but in some cases it seemed related to high 1.0 point and genetics. The programmers are not able to reach such children and essentially were all discarded into mental hospitals or used in rituals until about 20 years ago, when more and more of them were allowed to survive in public. An article, Altered States, based upon Donna Williams' autobiography. I can't pronounce that word. Graphical book, Someday Somewhere, seems to buttress that autism can be mind control duds. Williams is both autistic and MPD. Her book reveals that autistic children have acute sensory perception, intelligence, rather than retardation. There are different types of autism, and the authors do not understand the topic well enough to write much more than this. It is quite possible autism may have several causes, which some do not relate to the failure to become MPD or DID, but may be the result of some other cause. However, the increase in autistic children is believed by the authors to be the result of increased trauma-based mind control. MS, multiple sclerosis, is another side effect which can stem from brain stem scarring. Several victims of Illuminati trauma remember a special ritual torture device that is put inside a person and causes excruciating pain. It is made from only one kind of wood, a special wood, possibly myrtle. It has a painted spider on it between two satanic symbols. In review, the elements that make up a single whole personality, family history, personal history, and memories of abilities, talents, and one's self-image have all been stripped from the child when the mind divides itself up into sections walled off by amnesia walls. When the programmers work with each memory part, they have the option to give all the elements of whatever personality they want it to have. They can even make it into an animal or an inanimate object, because that little fragment has no chance to contradict what it is being programmed to believe. Although the memory part of the brain, which provides a person's personality, is divided, other parts of the brain function intact. Much of the elements of the Monarch mind control are based on things that are observed in normal life: disassociation, mental and chemical dependence, denial, charisma, discipline, personality, and torture, which have been refined into skilled methodologies for controlling a person and then combined into a group package. Illuminati rituals are based upon the most ancient mystery religions. The Rothschilds, like the ancient Canaanite mystery rituals. And some of the other Illuminati families with a Northern European Celtic background are very much into Druid rituals. Understand that historically the Druids gave up paganism for the truth of Christ. But now that neo-paganism would have people return to what the Celtic leadership gave up about 2,000 years ago. The drawings below were done by participants in high-level satanic ritual. The one participant drew several pictures of hearts, which her coven placed into jars. Some illustrations from the Egyptian Book of the Dead are included to show that the rituals of keeping hearts in a jar is straight from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The heart was placed in a jar for weighing it for judgment. The twin mirror image, goddess Mate, M-A-A-T, at times stands between the scales. And at the same time, Mat is also placed onto one side of the scale. This is similar to Christ judging a person, which is also being the standard against which a person is judged against. The papyrus of Cana, Qenna, the head of Anubis, is on the beam, and the ape, wearing disc and crescent, is seated upon a pylon-shaped pedestal beside the balance. Another picture shows Horus holding M-A-A-T in his hand, weighing the heart in the presence of a Mat, goddesses, and Anubis, who was holding the deceased by the hand. is presenting the heart to Osiris, while Isis and Nephthys, in the forms of apes, sit nearby. The drawing of the ritual stick shows what one type of stick used in satanic rituals looks like. Okay, guys, I finished chapter 2 of this book. I'll drop the link in there. This is what I was reading from. Thank you for letting me read it to you guys. Like, thanks for hanging out with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, Uncle Obvious. Deaf Bread. Hey, Peanut. Doc Michael. Wendy. Wendy, I got to get back to you, sweetheart. I will. Please forgive me. Vaccines do cause autism. Wendy, I think this just has to do with like the MK Ultra programming and stuff like that. I don't know. I have autistic alters, if that makes sense with you. I have some that don't speak. So it's great to see you, sweetheart. Tree, cellar door. Peanut, Brooke. Hey, Bonnie, how are you? Ace McLeod. How are you? Welcome, everyone. River, what are you doing? Okay, guys, I'm really glad you joined me. Tree, Wendy, Deaf Bread, Doc. Who else do we have here? Am I forgetting anyone? Painful, how are you? It's really good to see you, Painful. I was spying on you while you were fishing around Miles' site. It's great to see you, Painful. Thank you for giving me a really great day today. I appreciate it. You left me a really cool comment, so thank you. Jenna Kleinpeter, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Am I missing anyone? Impaler, how you doing? I've been meaning to reach out to you, Impaler. Forgive me. I'm so behind. Opus Focus, how are you, sweetheart? It's been so long. Too long. Anna, how are you? Ed Kurtz, welcome. Lou Gurley. Oh boy, it's great to see you guys. Okay, this is the book I was reading. There's the link. I don't know, when I deprogrammed or was trying to deprogram from MK Ultra and the DOMs and what the programmers had done to me, I found this book to come in really handy, but it's a big trigger warning. It'll jolt you. It'll jog your memory. And it might not leave you in the best mood that you started out reading it in. So, but I wanted to share it with you guys. So thank you so much. Peanut's here. I said Peanut's name, right? Christine Hart, how are you, sweetheart? Great to see you, honey. Oh, you guys, I'm going to put up links for you and Christine with Fritz Springmeier. Really great interview. So any of you MK Ultras out there, I'm going to post stuff up that I found really comforting and helpful to me for you guys. So bacon hot here in the UK. Yeah, it's hot where I am too, boy. Today finally cooled down, but forget it. Forget it. But I'll tell you what, I'll take the heat over 2 feet of snow and minus 14-degree weather, or even minus 4-degree weather any day. Ah, I love motorcycles, death bread. I have my motorcycle license and I'm dying to go down the street. There's a place to rent motorcycles and quads. I'd love to, but all right, guys. Wendy, I will be praying for you and your daughter. I lift you up to Heavenly Abba, sweetheart, in Yeshua's name. Okay, guys, thanks for hanging out with me for a while. So I really deeply appreciate it. A lot, a lot. So thank you. Stop. Oh, did I tell you guys my bear story? So this morning, right? I wake up. I'm feeling a lot better this morning than I have felt. Hey, Jesper, it's great to see you. I'm telling my bear story. So this morning I go out to walk my dog. And I'm merely walking her. It's not any type of big hike or anything like that. I'm just walking her. I had just woken up. I bring her down to a little park type area thing. And we come walking around the lake and just, we're walking. I happen to look up and 50 feet in front of me, I kid you guys not, there is this huge bear with a yearling walking straight for me and my dog. I would have to say this thing was about 50 feet away. And I thought to myself, well, this sucks. I got nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And I'm definitely not going to take my cell phone out for a selfie right now. But I see this thing walking straight at me and my dog. So I'm like, okay, keep her. And I start to veer her, like, we're making a left or whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll just take her for the long way around the lake, back up the hill and back to where we started from. And as soon as I, start to guide my dog, off, so that way I'm keeping the lake between me and the bear, trying to put something between me and the bear, hoping the fish in the lake will catch the bear's attention before me and the dog do. So I get some space between us. The bear all of a sudden makes a hard left. So I figure, okay, the bear's gone, and I proceed cautiously, and I start walking to where, I started. So I got to walk past where this bear was coming, and I see this guy out of the blue come around the corner, around the side of the building, and I'm like, yo, wait, stop, stop. And he's like, what? I'm like, sir, there's a big black bear with a yearling, and he just headed straight for this house. I don't think you want to be outside barbecuing anymore. And he's like, oh, no, 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 it's okay. That bear's been here for a while. And the yearling and the bear, it's the neighbor was like so relaxed about the whole thing. And he goes, oh, no, that bear's been here for a while. And he showed me where the bear and the cub stay, where they usually hang out, what trees they're usually scratching their back on. And he goes, don't worry, as long as you don't put out any bird seed or hummingbird nectar, you'll be fine. But that neighbor over here, he keeps putting that stuff out and it keeps attracting the bears. And so they're all nestled over there by his place. So now Keeper and I will be walking in a completely different direction every morning from now on. But I live in a gated community. So there's nowhere for this bear to go but in here. Boy, that was a big bear. It was bigger than any bear I've seen in Jersey at my grandparents' house or when I lived up in Newfoundland. I mean, this thing was huge. It could have eaten me and my chocolate lab and still had room for another main course. Okay, Keith. Okay. Hey, you're sounding like a bear. Okay. Go lay down. Uh-oh. Yeah, so it was a pretty big thing. But the neighbor was cool. Yeah, that bear's a member of the community. Yeah, but the guy's like standing outside barbecuing, Doc Michael. He's like, oh, yeah, there's a bear. I'm like, you're barbecuing, dude. Like, anyway. So, yeah, he's part of the community. The mascot to this gated community. Yeah. Yeah, she does want to tell a story. All right, guys, it was great to hang out with you. Hey, Peanut, why don't you run a show so I can come join? You run the best shows. Come on, Peanut. Everybody in my chat room wants you to run a live show. All right, well, on that note, give me a moment. I'm going to let go. So, on that note, I'm going to take Keeper for a walk in a completely different direction from the bear and her yearling. And I'll try to stay safe, but it is an uplifting story, isn't it? Holly almost got eaten by a bear. Aw, Seller, you're great. Thank you, hon. All right, guys, I hope that you have a beautiful evening, and I hope to catch you guys. Jesper, it's great to see you again. We're going to have to run some panels because August 1st is right around the corner, so we're going to have to, like, ooh, what are you guys doing this weekend? Do you guys want to, like, I don't know, put something together? Like, you have Peanut and me. There's like Jesper. There's a bunch of people in the chat room. We could all put together like a weekend of panels. You know, one weekend it was really cool. I met, a bunch of people. They were from all over the place, out of country, not in the U.S. Nobody spoke English but me. Well, except for the translators. But there was this one really cool weekend. They put it together. It was like 4 different channels. And what they would do is they run 4 to 6 hours. Like, say, for instance, I'd do a show for 4 to 6 hours and I'd have something planned and, of course, something to talk about to keep it going. But then once I would end, another channel, hypothetically, say like Peanut, like another channel would pick up and go 4 to 6 hours. Then once he was done, another channel would pick up. And the whole weekend they were discussing whether it be like child trafficking or whether MK Ultra or whether DUMBs or whether they were talking about star constellations and aliens. They all put together a show. And then so each channel from like Friday night to Sunday night was taking turns, but it was going around the clock. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, you know, if there were 4 channels, we could each kind of take a nap if we wanted. But the channels went from Friday night to Sunday night, and they just went all weekend long, night and day. And I thought it was so great. I stayed up with them all weekend long. I'll come on with you, Peanut. I'll come on with you whenever you want. Wendy, I want to meet Russ too. I want to meet you as well. Oh, well, meet Russ. Duh. I should say I want to reunite with Russ for my 5th time. in Cali. Can't wait. I'll come on with you tomorrow night. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. But yeah, like since Hangouts is going away, well, thank you for the invite, Peanut. But since Hangouts is going away, you think we could all put together something like that? I don't know. It's a thought. And tomorrow's Friday, guys, and August 1st is around the corner. So I don't know. I'd like to get you guys all on panels and get you guys talking. Um, you know, give your testimonies or have a round table or just throw ideas out on the table or start prayer chains or talk about issues that are bothering us and we might need a shoulder to lean on. But I don't know. You think we could do it? All right. I'm down. I'm in. You got it, Peanut. So I'll put up posts. Well, you know what I'll do is I'll give you a call after we're done, Peanut. And we'll try to see what we can put together. If anybody wants to join, please let me know. Could Skype, if Hangouts go away, and broadcast the Skype to live on a channel maybe if they don't take away lives either? That was the one thing, Deaf Bread, I couldn't figure out with Zoom. Was how to run a conference with panels on Zoom while getting it to play live on YouTube. I never figured that out. That's the one disconnect I'm having. Otherwise, Zoom is great. Although, if you want to run panels on Zoom and you want 3 or more people, you'll have to pay $15 a month. But at that point, I'll send somebody $5 a month and join their panel and split the costs with them. It's always a gift to be with you, Tree. Thank you so much. All right, guys, so let's try to put something fun together, you know? All right, guys, I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you guys some more. Stream multi-bread. I don't know about it. You know what? I'll figure it out. I'll look into that. Thank you, Deaf Bread. All right, guys, you have a beautiful, beautiful day, and I'll be back. Thank you for chilling with me for a while, and thanks for letting me read that with you guys. I deeply, and my alters deeply appreciate it. Take it easy.